Hello, everyone. Welcome to our How to Do Research and Get Published webinar. Today's webinar topic is titled Amplifying Voices, Strategies for Early Career Black Scholars in Academia. I'm very excited to have you all on board today. To get us started, I'd first like to introduce you to our team of presenters. First, Jessica Offenberger is a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. She manages a range of science and medicine journals, working with editors and societies to develop new strategies and problem solve. We're also joined by Jessica Horn, who is an East African feminist practitioner and writer. Her work is intentionally interdisciplinary, bridging policy and community, theory and practice, research and imagination, resources and action. Initially trained as women's health rights, Jessica served as commissioner on the Lancet Commission of Gender and Global Health and was the first coordinator of Humanitaire, the French Partnership for Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. Jessica pioneered the Futures Initiative at the African Women's Development Fund, and in 2021 became the first African woman to lead the Ford Foundation's East African office. Jessica's book, African Feminist Praxis, Cartographies and Liberatory World-Making, offers insight into decades of feminist movement. Jessica is a founder member of the African Feminist Forum and has served on several governance boards. She is currently Senior Research Fellow at Moleskine Foundation. Next, Dr. Ayo Sakai is a political linguist, scholar, and academic publisher whose research advances Black political thought, language theory, and institutional knowledge production. Her scholarship focuses on linguistic imperialism, examining language as a governing technology that shapes public policy, legislative discourse, and political legitimacy. Her research contributes to political science, sociolinguistics, and critical discourse studies by positioning language as an active mechanism of governance. She is the founder, CEO, and publisher of Universal Right Publications, LLC, a peer-reviewed academic press advancing Black scholarly leadership and disciplinary rigor. Her research, publications, and public scholarship are cited across academic, policy, and cultural contexts. And our last guest panelist is Dr. Temple, a professor of Africana Studies at University of Pittsburgh and editor-in-chief of Journal of Black Studies. She specializes in Africana cultural memory, the intersection of history and literature, and Pan-Africanism. She is an award-winning author, and her books include Literary Pan-Africanism, Black Cultural Mythology, Transcendence, and Africana Literary Enterprise, Literary Spaces, and Muhammad Ali and Africana Cultural Memory. She is part of the first generation of scholars to take advantage of the opportunity to earn a PhD directly in Africana Studies, which has come with a high responsibility to help pioneer foundational scholarship, textbooks, conceptual innovation, and a vision that helps to define and sustain disciplinary Africana studies. And last, my name is Sean Scarsbrick. I am a marketing manager on the community engagement team at Sage, and my primary role is to support authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing and review process. Throughout today's call, please send us your questions using the Q&A function on your screen. If you see a question you find particularly interesting, please do upvote it and we'll prioritize it at the end. Any questions we don't get to live, we will follow up with in a blog post. And I'm very happy now to pass it over to Jessica Offenberger.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much. To start us off, I just wanted to set the groundwork for the webinar and what we're hoping to achieve with this session today. So we're hosting this in honor and in recognition of Black History Month and its global relevance. And we really want to dedicate this to empowering early career Black scholars in academic publishing, although everyone is welcome to join. And I know we have people joining us from all around the globe, across all different diverse backgrounds, as this is a conversation for everyone. And so in today's panel discussion, we're going to be addressing barriers to access, representation, and support in scholarly communication and the publishing process. So it is really a privilege and a pleasure to have um, the three of you here today, Io, Crystal, Jessica, and have this conversation. So I'd like to start us off in the spirit of kicking off our conversation today. Crystal, I'm going to point this first question to you. How can researchers avoid oversimplifying the diversity within Black communities in scholarly work?
Thank you very much, Jessica. This question, I'm answering it from an Africana Studies point of view. In my bio, it mentioned that I'm part of the first generation to receive a PhD in Africana Studies. And so, simply stated, Black Studies, Africana Studies is not DEI. And so, diversity, equity, inclusion, many of our courses are diversity requirements. That's a misnomer. But what I find as a journal editor is that many people are doing work on Black subjects, but they are unfamiliar with the diversity of institutional Africana and Black studies, which can function as Black studies. It's the language is updated to Africana studies. We have diaspora studies, Pan-African studies, Africology, and even something as basic as the understanding the difference between African-centered and Afrocentric. And so the second part from the journal's perspective is that Black Studies is this the Journal of Black Studies offers this rich moment to have immersion in African-centered, Afrocentric idea formation, and that we are very post-Western. We do not need the Western genealogy and historiography in our journals. We want you to dive in with the African-centered analyses. And so we're not a multicultural journal either. And so I find that diversity is kind of assumed that if we're Black studies, then we're also um, Latino studies and other area studies, and we actually aren't. And so that's what I'd say on behalf of the Journal of Black Studies and our orientation to knowledge.
Great. Thank you. Jessica, over to you to add any additional thoughts.
Thank you for this question and also for the pleasure of being with all of you today. And yeah, Dr. Samples, pointed to the kind of history of the genealogy, and I think that's the awkwardness is actually in the origin of Black itself, which obviously comes out of the colonial encounter with racial capitalism and this impetus to basically overgeneralize about a large swathe of the world, right, in order to dominate them. And so, we have this awkwardness. I think what is beautiful, though, is that in response to that, what we have done as peoples who are framed as Black is to reclaim the idea. And I come from and sit in a tradition of pro-Black, of Pan-African, of Black collectivist thinking, where we have proactively chosen to frame ourselves as Black and to find a kinship, even though we have, very different backgrounds in some cases, we speak different languages, we have different viewpoints and vantage points. In both cases, of course, though, there is the potential to overgeneralize. And so I think the antidote to that is to be specific and to be true to the material. You know, the whole point actually of generating, writing at depth is rigor. And so be specific and be true to the material, and show the contradictions, talk about the conversations, basically profile the diversity of thinking amongst us, right? And the diversity of forms of articulation. Lastly, I would just say with language, we are in an Anglophone-centric world, but actually across the Black world, people speak a huge diversity of languages. From colonial languages, but also, there are other languages, the patois and their original languages. And so I think it's also very important to engage language there too, and to sort of see how people articulate in their environments and to use that language when you're writing about the concept, because language holds history. And so it's important there. And I think that's the way, if we just, like I said, be specific, be true to the material, and dig into the incredible plethora of articulations that exist. That is the way that we show, the true sense, the true texture of Black experience.
Thank you so much. All right. What practical steps ensure you cite Black scholars and foundational Black scholarship comprehensively? Um, Crystal, shall we start off with you?
Yes, absolutely. This is a very interesting question from the journal's perspective, that I will have submissions on African proverbs, so Ghanaian or Nigerian, and African proverbs, submissions on Africana womanism, submissions on Pan-Africanism. And it's like our journal is over 50 years old, and we have been publishing these topics, and scholars forget to kind of exhaust the sources to mine and kind of locate the genealogies again, historiography again, of these topics that they have appeared in our journal as this Black immersive space that supports Africana studies. And so I also find that scholars will, we're required to exhaust the sources. And I find that a lot of scholars will highlight the scholarship with which they're familiar instead of searching adjacent keywords for their topics. So I'll get a lot of Du Bois and the color line. That was from the early 1900s. I get a lot of mentions, random mentions as of Fanon scholarship, critical race theory, and these are fossil. They're not based on exhausting the sources. And so I find if you look for it, if you exhaust the sources, you will find them. But also there's an awareness too of of context. Recently during Black History Month, I've been doing presentations, but my attention has been to the Library of Congress categorization, the E185, E184.5 to 1 point, E184 points, E184.7 section of our libraries. That's Africana Studies. And so there are sources there since the early 60s, the mid to early 60s, about Africana studies, and they are not as searchable. I find in Google Ngram, for example, Google Books, I find myself updating my own research because there are now citations that didn't exist before because they weren't searchable on digital platforms. And I'm finding that concepts that I thought were original aren't as original. Other people said them before. And so the process of research, of course, it's formal, but it's also trial and error, but there's also adjacent context. And so for Journal of Black Studies, I would like for people to have a broader historical understanding of the discipline from the 1960s, because then they will understand how, in one respect, there's nothing new under the sun. There has been some conceptualization, even broadly, of these ideas that we're experiencing in the contemporary moment. And the objective of research is to show that we are well read and that we are not overlooking scholarship that said the same thing years ago. And so it's kind of that line of innovation. What is innovative about contemporary research? Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Crystal. Jessica, would you like to go next? And then Io, if you have anything to add after?
I mean, I wholly agree with the previous submission, and this is a passion topic for me. The book that I'd published with Sage, African Feminist Praxis, Cartographies of Liberatory World Making, was in many respects a citation exercise because I spent my entire academic life searching for references of African feminisms and finding very little. And actually, African feminisms are largely unpublished. So even in the scholarship, a lot of it is in PhD theses, and then to some extent in peer-reviewed journals. But a lot of the praxis is articulated in other spaces. And so one of the things I think that is important to do is to also expand the concept of what is citable material. So I think you can do your journal searches and you can look for books, but you also have to look in other places for where the scholarship is articulated. And so I cite poetry, I cite music, I cite presentations that have happened live and are recorded on YouTube, because that is where the knowledge production has happened. And there is, again, a limitation to, the historical infrastructure doesn't exist to support African feminisms to be published in these other ways. And I also think then there's a need to think about teaching and curricula, because, we need to expand that. And what is in the curriculum in the first place, because that's also where a lot of the scholarship begins. And lastly, I would just say that I think we need to take it on as a responsibility, so citation as a responsibility, so to do the work, as Dr. Temple's saying, and to actually ask yourself, as you begin to look or as you write, did someone else say it? Has this already been said? Was this articulated? Was this articulated in my context? Instead of using, the one person that everybody cites from somewhere else. Was this articulated in the context that I'm researching, and try to find, that exploration there?
you. Over to you, Ayo.
Oh, great. No, thank you. And I don't really have much to add because these scholars are so have really touched on some really great point. But I just want to say that from a structural level, that's the change that really needs to happen. Because a lot of times we think about foundational scholars and we're not thinking about the fact that there are a bridge of people that's doing the work as well. So we are citing the work of foundational scholars, but we should also think about the new people, the people, the generation after them that is citing the work. So as Crystal said earlier, you're finding that people are talking about things that are fossil, and it's okay and important to build the bridge on that information. But unfortunately, we're not talking about their proteges. There are a lot of people who are continuing the work of some phenomenal scholars, but we don't hear about those people who are directly taught by foundational scholars who are not being mentioned and brought to the forefront because the work have to continue and the legacy have to continue. So I am really interested in seeing from a structural level how we incorporate new information, new citation, new scholars, and new ideas and frameworks that are coming to the forefront that's building on the foundational scholars and the information that was previously created and presented to us to use as our scholarly infrastructure.
That thank you all so much for sharing these insights. Is there a strategy that consistently works for getting fair peer review on Black research, thinking about the scholarly realm? Ayo, would you like to start us off?
Yes, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for that question. There are strategies that are important to getting fair peer review. What we find is that a lot of people who are doing Black studies are studying Black people from a lack of agency perspective. We are under a microscope all the time, but our research, our framework, our ontology, our epistemologies are not being used correctly when we cite each other. So getting fair peer review require that you have people from all the diversity, like Jessica mentioned, at the table. Who are the people that are being included at the table for citations? Do we have enough scholars who are aware of not just the original foundational scholars who have presented the work, but the new voices that are coming to the forefront? It is going to be impossible for us to move to the next generation of scholarship when we're constantly asked as scholars to cite the five newest publishers. And because 80% of scholars who are being published are white men and only 6% are Black scholars, totality, of course, the expert in the field will be the people who are being published mostly and have the machine behind them to push forward. So we need a diversity of people who are sitting at the table, who are journal editors, who are peer reviewers, who are really teaching the work so that we can embrace new ideas, new ideologies, new epistemologies to incorporate in our work to give voice to the people who are really talking about Black scholarship, Black research, and Black people, not as somebody to be under the microscope, but as people who have their own agency and our own language and our own way of seeing each other. And I'll give a quick example because I was at a conference, with my mentor, and one person did a whole dissertation paper on enslaved women who gave away their children. And she talked about how this woman was so happy to give away her children and to send them off, and she was corrected, by the moderator who said to her, your positionality is wrong. You are looking at this woman not from a survival perspective, as a woman who's looking at legacy and to the future and trying to make sure that she's ensuring her children's survival and the loss and the pain that she's feeling. Because you do not have the correct positionality or framework, you are really just speaking from a perspective of what you just see on the paper, static. what you're reading. So you can, it's like hearing a slave song and saying that the enslaved Africans were happy on the plantations. You have to understand a little bit deeper than that. And in order for you to do that, you need to turn to the people who are doing the work, doing the research, digging deeper, and citing those individuals who are saying it correctly. And the only way you're going to get fair peer review is to make sure that you have people at the table who will recognize that and allow that to be incorporated.
Thank you. Crystal, is there anything that you wanted to add?
Yes. And the bottom line is that peer review makes research better. In our journal, we have at a minimum double-blind peer review. Sometimes we add a third reviewer, and then we have an editorial team. So that's two more senior editors who are also reviewing the work. And I say that peer review is useful and important, and even a scathing review should have something useful. And so I can't stand peer review. Oh my gosh, I get it back. I have to sit with it, kind of pray. I've got to, eat some sugar ice cream. I mean, I really have to process it because it's hard to have our work critiqued. But the beautiful thing is that my journal prioritizes this, and many others will if you take the step, that authors, you have the agency to communicate with the peer review, wherein you accept what's useful, and you can be very, very straightforward in saying, this is what this reviewer has suggested is beyond the scope of my research. I disagree. This reviewer is coming from a different field, and you can explain that. And so at the Journal of Black Studies, we do very much respond to that and make sure that the author has agency in terms of peer review. And so I find that even in my own research, sometimes you can polish a paper forever. Like you take an extra couple of months before you submit it when it actually was good enough to submit a bit earlier on. But peer review, if we think of it as it's kind of like asking for directions. How do I get, from here to San Jose? You turn left here, you do this, you stop here, you might want to get gas over here. It's really helpful to peer review saying, hey, is there anything that you see that you can tell me what to do to make it better? And it's not even a mystery. And so I think we need to kind of set our feelings aside. I do the same thing and just dive in and say a lot of these are good suggestions. And so we tend with the journal, we've tried to avoid asking only deep Black studies people to be our reviewers. We'll take an essay and look at, and we hunt and search for the experts in that field, not just in Black studies. And so there are a lot of, in terms of service, there are a lot of scholars who do this, and Black studies, this, and Africana studies. And so we're gotten to the point where so many people are claiming Black studies that we are demanding almost that they help them do service to the field. And that gets us a variety of different perspectives. Sometimes one scholar is more traditional discipline based, psychology or economics, and they may not see that, but that's what the editors are for. And so this is a note too for editors that we have to put in the work of reading these and analyzing those, and I get recommendations from my other editors too. So we try to ensure that peer review is fair because we have so many perspectives, and we also prioritize the voice and intent and agency of the author.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Shifting topics a little bit. How do you build equitable multi-institution partnerships that don't reproduce resource inequities? Crystal, would you like to start us off?
Yes, I will. I can answer more the first part of the question, building partnerships. In our field of Black Studies, for example, we have National Council for Black Studies. They have their own journal, International Journal of Black Studies. We have ASALH, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. They have an organization, and they have the Journal of African American History. We have College Language Association. It has CLA Journal. And here we are, Journal of Black Studies, and we are not tied to an association. And so for me, these partnerships is, as editor, I attend as many Black Studies adjacent conferences as I can. And so it's my presence in these spaces with Journal of Black Studies on my badge, the way I communicate with people, that I'm trying to build partnerships because we are at a deficit in a sense, because I'm at CLA conference, they have their own journal. They want authors to submit to their journal, but I'm also in that space. And so there's also, I learned recently too, that our journal can be an allied organization with these other institutions. We can be a member of NCBS. We can be allied with College Language Association. And so for me, it's about building relationships so that there's depth. And so when scholars go up for tenure, all of your articles can't be in the same journal. You want to diversify. And so even with the editor being in this space saying, hey, we are here and we are a partner, we're not trying to take scholarship away from your journal, but understand that this is our broader community. And so this partnership of presence, of communication, of building relationships on the ground through conferences and other encounters is a way to make sure that scholars have as many publishing outlets as they can, and that beyond that, you have advocates in the field who may see your name later. While I'm on a search committee, you have advocates in the field who are going to be familiar with you through personal partnerships as well as institutional partnerships for when it's time to write for external promotion review letters and moving up in the ranks of the academy or even being nominated for awards. And so I think of partnership on a person-to-person basis as well as a person-to-institution basis.
Thank you so much. Jessica, is there anything you'd like to add to the question and the conversation?
Sure. I mean, I think even from the follow through from the peer review conversation, just that the reality is that knowledge is created together, right? Like there's actually no singular knowledge production where you just create something and it goes out into the world, in at least in the way that it's done with rigor and in a kind of academic model. And so it's the same too then with the resourcing, right? So resourcing aids research. Certainly in African environments, the majority of research is funded by government. And the African Union has a target of African countries giving 1% of GDP to research, and most countries don't even reach half of that. So most research is actually funded by foreign donors. And that, of course, then does create an imbalance just because it's then guided by whatever is a priority for those donors. But also, of course, those donors will always want to ensure that their own researchers have visibility and voice. So, I mean, I actually think in some respects, it's you either set the agenda to ensure that researchers from context are the ones who are leading, or you raise your own money. The second is, the question of how to create equitable partnerships between researchers and practitioners, because that's the space that I've been in and I've also helped resource. And I think the gender-based violence there's a pool of research that has been evolving, very interesting research over many years around prevention of violence against women and girls, evidence-based prevention. So it's really a collaboration between public health researchers and practitioners working in community around prevention of violence. And there's been some very interesting experiences that I think are actually worth looking at. I wrote a paper for UN University some years back around that, just looking at some of the tensions and challenges also because practitioners there's always an inequity in terms of a sense of who's an expert. Practitioners also have different timelines. When knowledge is produced, they want to be able to apply it quickly, particularly in the context of something like violence, where if there's evidence about methodologies to prevent, they want to start using them. And so there's just, a lot of different kind of ethical considerations, different set, again, sort of power dynamics in terms of who produces knowledge and who's recognized for it. So I think it's an important question to put on the table, but also I think naming it is the key to addressing it. And I think it's very often not named, and that's part of the sort of tensions that remain. But I do think that there are some very interesting models that are being used these days, particularly to solve kind of practical problems, to sort of solve tangible problems in the world. So in public health research and agricultural and other kinds of spaces like that. So yeah, like I said, I think it's partly about naming it and surfacing it, but also, like I said, about leveraging different kinds of resources to be able to be on equal ground.
Thank you. Both raise great points, and this has been a fantastic discussion. We have some more questions I'd love to dive into. How do factors like race, gender, class, and societal position influence the way you approach your work? Crystal, would you like to start us off?
I certainly would. I'm first generation. My parents didn't go to college. I think I had an aunt. My dad's sister went to college, but there are my positionality as first generation, my positionality as Black, as in seeing injustice, working in the university, such as them sequestering the information that after third year review that I could have applied for a semester off, like a pre-tenure sabbatical. They just didn't tell me because I'm Black. Um, and with respect to class, just the cost of being a professor, and even first generation, I remember I was one of my dissertation co-advisors. She asked me if I were a native English speaker. I'm born in Richmond, Virginia, and I didn't know what she meant, and I was afraid to ask. And that question has sat with me for 20 years. Am I a native English speaker? And so there's something about the way that I put words together as a first generation scholar coming to kind of knowledge in an organic way. Those SAT vocabularies from ninth grade, that was the funnest thing I ever learned, pedantic and all of these different vocabularies. And so I've written in a way that uses these. And I think that the threat then has been that it's now gotten, well, it could be border jargonistic, but it's not as plain language as I would like, and that's what I'm shifting back to. But my mother, her original language was German, and just recently, I forgot. I just remembered that. I was like, maybe that's what she meant. And my mother came to English, casually learning it as a child. But the point is that we are an international journal. We receive articles from everywhere, submissions from everywhere, and um, I've sent articles out where some of the linguistic patterns were not what we expect in United States English, and just had scholars write back, like, you all just the dumbest journal. I can't believe you're even considering this. And it's my positionality and understanding that we have to have a bit of flexibility to try to, as editors, finesse the language and gently push authors to write in a way that the United States recognizes, because that's the home of our journalistic space. And even in terms of there were words that I didn't learn until I was way grown, like words like hubris, like ubiquitous, like they were just never in my worldview, and then they're thrown around everywhere. But what is there's another word, but I see these with this, the antenna and lens into the text. And so as an editor, I'm so excited to be in this position where I can use my experiences in these categories, class and gender and race and social position, to kind of say, I can kind of see where this scholar is coming from. And then that allows me, I have a commitment to the type of communication that says, I see you, that I understand which part you're working from, and that I give the advice and the recommendations for scholarship in a way that if a scholar remembers anything from engaging with the Journal of Black Studies, they remember the kindness of the editor that saw them and understood them and tried to nurture instead of kind of beat down as we try to get these articles where they need to be publication ready. Thank you.
Thank you. Io, is there anything you'd like to add?
Absolutely. I loved everything that you just said, Crystal, because I've experienced your gravitas and the way you really nurture and build into that as a scholar myself. And so I'm going to answer this question twofold. One, I'm going to touch a little bit on what just Crystal said from my positionality, being born and raised in Jamaica, came to this country, grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I've traveled extensively. And so the way I speak and the way I sound, the way I think, goes back to my international foresight and access. And thinking like a Caribbean woman, thinking like a Jamaican woman, doing research in the United States is very difficult. I remember in my master's program, the chair of the department said to me, I am so sorry to do this to you because you think broadly and widely of more of a community and internationally, where in scholarship, you have to literally be more nuanced, tear everything apart, and only attack one piece at a time. And that was the real beginning of really breaking apart myself and understanding that, you have to be separate. And that actually fractured me in a lot of ways because later on I had to figure out how to come back and bring my whole self in. And so I think a lot of scholars coming from international foundation and background struggle with this. How do I be my full self and bring my full self to the table when I'm doing research? And so you have all of these kind of stacked against you. And so from that perspective, yes, race, gender, or epistemology, or language, sometimes, you get excited. And for me, I'm just starting to realize that being Jamaican is talking fast. But I've been told on many occasions, don't talk fast, slow down because you're not taking it seriously, which is interesting because when I'm in the Caribbean community and I am around Caribbean scholars, I see myself resonated in such a more beautiful way. So even the code switching of language, of identity, of gender, who you are, how you present, all of this is always up against the grain when you're a scholar. The second thing that I am going to address is being a publisher. So being the publisher and founder of, a social science press that is emerging to fill the gap in a space that has never been there before, where, scholars are, have not had a place where they can bring their whole selves. Because unfortunately, it's the structural level that we are having challenges with. We don't think as Black people, oh, what gender am I when we're writing? Or where did I come from? Or what language we speak. I think that is a Eurocentric way of positioning people of color, Black people in general, and putting us in boxes that forces us to really confront these type of things because when we come to the table, we bring ourselves, who we are, our identities, our language, how we see ourselves, our gender, and our gender identities. And it is within the Eurocentric construct that we are forced then to go, what is my positionality? I am Black, or I am transgender, or I am LGBTQ, or I am Jamaican. Where we don't think of that ourselves when we're doing our reading or writing on our resources. So I think that's something that we don't think about a lot, and it's important to have that conversation as well.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a fantastic discussion, and I've been seeing comments coming into the Q&A um, echoing those sentiments. So Io, this next question is for you as well. How might bias influence the peer review process for work focused on Black scholarship or Black experiences?
Thank you for that question. And that really builds onto what I originally started speaking about. And, that's one of the reasons why universal right publications is so important. It has already been said that we need diversity in resources, right? Everyone who's in scholarship needs to get published. Anyone who's interested in scholarship citations, referencing, being able to build in our scholarship and how we think and what we write need to be published. So it's not a matter of taking away from what any one person is doing. We need, like Crystal said, the Journal of Black Studies. We need ASALA. We need the Association of Black Psychologists. And then we also need a space like Universal Right Publications that is focusing on publishing Black scholars. Again, only 6% of Black scholars are being published. So the gatekeeping, the roadblock is there at a very existential level, which prevents Black scholars from not only being the expert in the field, but also, being able to get a tenure, get a job, get merit promotion, get grants. All of these are contingent in getting published. And so if we're focused on publishing the experts in the field, who are the 80%, then the brilliant voices and the people who are bringing forth the continuation of foundational scholars are not being heard. We're not given voice. So UWP is here to fill that gap. publishing monographs and having the researcher where emerging scholars and early career scholars can actually publish their work. So we have this space that is op-ed and journal-esque. Is that you can actually go ahead and prepare your CV and your dissertation as you pretend you prepare to publish in the big journals, and then you can have your monograph where you're not being forced to put yourself under a microscope from the Eurocentric perspective, but to speak fully and bring yourself fully to the table, which is why we have so many preeminent and prolific scholars who have published with all the big journals who are coming back to UWP and saying, you know what, I've had a book for 10 years that is my whole self that I would never publish anywhere else because I'm able to talk about who I am authentically with the same rigor, with the same citations, with the same references, but being able to bridge and build a gap for the emerging scholars. So I think that is really important when we're talking about ethical research and the challenges that we face. In addition to that, a lot of scholars are getting pushback from the big Eurocentric presses that's saying, you're not citing, the right people. So who are the right people? Whose canon are we using? Whose voice get to be included at the table? And I think those are the important questions that are not being asked, and that, the other disciplines like ASALA and JBS and Universal Right Publications are giving space to.
Thank you so much. Thank you. To round off our Q&A from the panels, before we head into the fantastic questions that everyone has been sending in, I'd like to pose one final question to the group. What advice do you have for someone looking to get published? I mean, obviously, the three of you have shared fantastic insight and advice, but are there any key takeaways or that you would like to share in helping scholars get published? Um, shall we start off with you, Jessica, then go to you, Crystal, and end with you, Ayo?
Sure, thank you. And I should say that again, I'm a practitioner who writes um, into peer-reviewed space, you know. But I just want to bounce a little bit off what Io was saying because, you know, we need to recognize that the world is so there's a minority viewpoint that is controlling a majoritarian reality. Um, for example, to say to any Jamaican that they don't know how to speak is a surprise to me because Jamaicans, I think, as a country, are probably some of the most eloquent, playful, I mean, just Jamaican English at all registers is a phenomenon to behold, yeah? And playful. And so I just think again, it's this thing of, we can understand that and we can hear it. And so it's almost like a loss to the world if we're not hearing that in publishing. By 2050, 1 in 4 people in the world would be an African. I do quite a lot of work in future space, and I think we just, again, need to embrace the fact that the world is shifting demographically very fast. So again, what do we gain by blocking certain knowledges? Nothing, right? Humanity, if the academy is about an investigation of our humanity, and the different sort of, domains of our experience, we need to actually embrace the fact that we need to understand Black experience, because it is actually majority experience and increasingly so in the world. Publishing is interesting. So, I speak in a way a little bit from a social science perspective, and I know that also different kind of academic disciplines have different kind of, parameters that frame publishing. But I think in the social sciences, we have to acknowledge the fact that the way that knowledge travels has just fundamentally changed with the birth of social media. And so you can't ignore that. And the way that writing circulates has changed, the way that ideas travel has changed, and the fact that thinking and thought leadership now happens in a plethora of spaces. And you just have to get in and engage it. I was speaking with a PhD who was, bemoaning the fact that they spent years of their life studying, and now any old person on LinkedIn can basically, write about their actual ex area of expertise, this expertise that they, spent years of their life trying to hone and suffered for, and and all of that, and become better known than them. And my response was, well, why don't you write on LinkedIn? You know what I mean? So you got to get into it. And I think with publishing too, it's become increasingly hard to sell because people are so used to free knowledge now. And so because of that, a lot of publishers look also at your visibility, right? And your position in the market. And so I actually think that on a practical level, you just have to get in and produce your knowledge and put it out into public space. While you're working on, again, your peer-reviewed articles or your books or what have you, you also need to build that visibility. And I think that's really critical. And to understand, again, to think about yourself in a knowledge ecosystem, and what you're contributing there, and again, how you build an audience for your ideas. I think that part is critical. And again, others will speak to, the process with academic journals, etc. But I would say that again, as from a practitioner vantage point, but also from my experience of engaging in the publishing space. The other thing I think is I was talking about, having founded a press and that comes from a different vantage point. I just think, we have to write in the voice that is ours. Like all you have is your voice. You have to write in your voice. And so seek out publishers who will actually embrace your voice and are interested to publish in the way that you want to write. Of course, with the rigor and everything, but in your voice. And now there are more of those. And I think you should seek out those platforms and publish there because like I said, 2050, 1 in 4 people in the world would be African. We're moving to a very different demographic reality. And I think it's actually really critical that we produce the knowledge in the ways that we speak, in the ways that we write, and with the kind of epistemological universe that is true to us. And so find those spaces and build them and engage them and build their relevance, and also support them in terms of what they're trying to do.
Thank you. Over to you, Crystal.
Yes, and my comments build on what Io has offered, what Jessica has offered. Several things. To do this work, uh, to me, it's always been, I've had to say, I'm invincible. And it takes this confidence and this knowledge that despite naysayers, that your work is good, that your methodologies and the worldview of Africa and the diaspora are profound. I remember telling my mentor, a big mama type mentor, multicultural affairs, when I was an undergrad, I want to go in Africana studies. She's like, no, 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 don't do that. Go in American studies and weave in. And so there has been resistance to the growth of Black studies, idea formation. The university wants a little of it. They want a little bit, but they don't want the whole thing. And so the advice I've been given over the years is never stop reading. And as you continue to read, you find these morsels that are useful, that other people wouldn't put ideas together in the same way. The other part of the advice I would say is that you have to know the foundational scholarship of the fields in which you're publishing. And so for this, I'm talking about Black studies. There is so much rich Black studies knowledge and philosophy, idea formation in our archives. And I find that a lot of scholars are kind of coming to this in a brand new sort of way, as if we don't have this 60-year tradition of idea formation. Dr. Asante and Dr. Malefi Asante at Temple University, which was the first place to offer the PhD in Africana Studies, at dissertations, he says, why could this work not have been done in any other department? Why did it have to be here? And that's such an important question that we need to think of, because for publishing, we can only publish your ideas that are innovative. And I encourage everyone to be very straightforward at the beginning of the scholarship that you're presenting to say, this is where my work departs from what's pre-existing, and this is my innovative contribution as new knowledge. And that's what makes it publication worthy. So I wish you all the best and thank you so much for joining us. And I hope something that we've said is useful. So that's my advice. Thank you.
Okay.
Over to
Oh,
you, Io.
thank you so much. I was in the middle of trying to respond to a question. Um, but thank you so much again, for everyone who joined and for giving us the space. And thank you, Jessica and Sean and Sage. Sage being a phenomenal partner of Universal Right Publications. I don't know, yeah, I cannot say how much I've learned and grown through that partnership because Sage's power and visibility have allowed Universal Right Publications to emerge and to attempt to bridge that gap in space as being an academic scholar for Black scholarship. Because we have a history of Black scholars, from Frederick Douglass to James Baldwin, to, of course, Booker T. Washington and all of the phenomenal scholars who have used publishing and writing to really make space and room for us. And unfortunately, we haven't had someone attempting to bridge that gap in an academic space as a Black publisher before. So I am grateful for that opportunity, and I'm grateful for the partnership of Sage for that opportunity as well. So what I wanted to share was, is for me, and I'm not sure if this could help somebody, and I hope it does. When I was going through my program, I got my PhD at Howard University in political science. And when I wanted to study linguistic imperialism, it was a struggle. I had to go to the African Studies department to take courses, and I had to go to the communication department to take courses to fully understand and embrace who I am through my evolution and becoming, I have this amazing advisor and mentor who really toiled to help me pull my full self together. And the first thing I did in 2016, I was like a second year doc student. I was really wanting to write something on creative poetry with political science and Black studies, and I was so afraid to do it. And Dr. Asante, Dr. Molefekete Asante, who Crystal mentioned, the founder, the original creator and founder of the Journal of Black Studies, who pushed it for 50 years through Sage publication, he told me, why are you waiting for permission? Why are you waiting for permission to be yourself, to do yourself? Nobody has to give you permission, just do it. And so I published my first book, Afrocentric before Afrocentricity, because learning about Afrocentricity was the first thing I understood that grounded me as a Black scholar, as a Caribbean woman. And it was so freeing to do that. And of course, I was embarrassed and ashamed and, of course, chastised, for having done that. And it took 10 years for me to move forward and do the second edition, which is A Squared, a poetical science discourse, which later gave me the room to not only build on my linguistic imperialism scholarship, but also to talk about poetry and art the way I wanted to incorporate my full self. So I say to everyone, find the people who see you, find your community, find the people who will uplift and embrace who you are. Thank you so much, Jessica, for talking about, Jamaican colloquialism and our language structure, because the minute I get excited, of course, you ever start coming out and talking patois, right? But it's so hard for people to understand and really embrace that. But you can find those spaces, and I found it in Afrocentricity. I found it in African-centered spaces. I found it in Black studies, and I found it in political science spaces that embrace Black studies. So my advice is to be yourself. Eventually it will happen. Your gifts will make room for you. And if you're being authentic, and of course, my positionality is do no harm, embrace diversity, and everything will be okay. It's not going to be easy, but I do believe it will be okay.
Great. Thank you so much. And just a very, very big thank you to the three of you Io, Crystal, Jessica, for sharing your time, your expertise, and your insight with the audience today. As I said, this has just been an incredibly engaging and insightful discussion, and I know the audience feels the same way. We have time, I think, for one question from the Q&A, but just for all of those that might be concerned, we will be following up and answering all of your questions. So that will be addressed. So don't worry if we didn't get to your question today. You will hear from us. So with that, um, I'll pose this last question to the group. What institutional and interpersonal strategies can academic mentors, departments, and professional organizations most effectively employ to ensure that early career Black scholars not only secure tenure track positions, but also experience equitable access to influential publication venues, research funding, and senior mentorship networks that are critical for long-term academic success? And please feel free to take that too in whatever direction uh, you might feel inspired. If anyone wants to start us out.
I'll start us out. This is an early career scholar question, right? And um, I found that communication at the department level is so important when you're getting in for your first tenure track job. It's that you need to talk to everyone. You need to build relationships with everyone. And I'm a church girl, and I was trained that if I'm sitting in church and there's a sermon and it's on a very familiar passage of scripture, that instead of getting up and wandering, going to get some water, leaving church to check my cell phone or whatever, that it's my job to listen to it because even though I'm very familiar with this passage, that there's always something that's going to be learned in repetition, hearing something over again. It's like watching a movie and I've seen this 4 times and I've never seen that one point. And so um, sometimes I've seen junior scholars kind of tune out because I know that already. I've heard that already. And then that seems to break up the possibilities of a growing relationship because I've seen junior scholars um, kind of write off the scholars in the room or in the department in a way that says, oh, there's nothing I can learn from you. And so it's not the communication and communication, talking between the offices, having lunch, reading the CVs of the people in your department and those people who are going to be external mentors beyond your department. All of these are so important because I expect that every generation is going to be smarter than I am. Every generation is going to take everything that exists and grow it and bloom. And so we're kind of in the stewardship as faculty where my job is to invest everything that I can in new scholars. But if I don't have access to them, if we don't talk, if scholars come in like, oh, we're published in the same places, I'm a star and you're just here in this department. It's about interpersonal relationships that we have to develop because that adage about you want people who are going to advocate for you, who are going to say your name in a room full of people in a positive way, unanticipatedly, that's what we're striving for. And the more we talk, the more we see what junior scholars are doing, the more we see, oh, we can nominate or volunteer them or connect them with other scholars. So like, oh, I'm doing a book. And I was like, oh, I know someone in my department or an adjacent department. And so communication, the sincerity, and even kind of the respect on the ground level is what's going to open up opportunities that would lead to all of the things at the end of that question, mentoring and publication and promotion and tenure.
And I'm just going to chime in really quickly because that was a great point as far as, building and saying your names in room that you are not in. When you find your community and the people who embrace you for who you are, you tend to find those people who will uplift you and call your names in rooms that you are not there, lovingly, in a good way, upliftingly, and giving you opportunities. And it's one of the things that I really urge senior and established scholars to do, which is to bridge the gap by co-authoring work with emerging scholars. We have some phenomenal Black scholars who are traditionalists, who are grounded in all of the big Eurocentric publishing. And a lot of them are now retiring or leaving the academy for various reasons. And I'm encouraging senior scholars like them to find junior scholars, emerging scholars, and early career scholars to co-author with, give them first author publication, because not only will they continue your legacy and carry on your name and your work, but they will also be the next generation to teach the person coming behind them. And that is so important, not to hold on to power or not to feel like you're being erased, by an emerging scholar coming up, because like Crystal said, every generation will have more resource, more technology, more opportunity to do things that we don't have. And unless we give them space to grow and learn and to basically pass that baton, we are going to kill scholarship, not build it.
Sure, and maybe I shouldn't be the one to end because I'm speaking from outside the academy, but I do think that okay, I come from a tradition that believes that whatever we do needs to be relevant. Needs to be relevant. And I think when people are thinking about building out their scholarship, just think about relevance. Think about the ecosystem of ideas that you are situated in. And the ecosystem of ideas exists within the academy, but of course it always exists outside of it, because what scholars study is usually not the academy itself. I mean, some do, but most do not. Most study the world around. And so think about also, how is your scholarship and your praxis rooted in the world around? What are the relationships that you're building, right, with institutions, with knowledge production, with conversations, with people outside of the physical space of the academy, right? How is your knowledge production rooted, like I said, in a broader ecosystem of thinking, and how is it relevant? Because I think the work that is relevant is also the work that moves, and so to really think about how you don't stay narrow, and again broaden out and ensure that you're kind of woven into the world, you know. Um, Academic work is not only engaged from within the academy, and I think, just to close, the African Feminist Forum, which I've been a part of for since its founding, was very good at always ensuring that we were a space that always had very close collaboration with feminist academics. And knowledge production was central to what we did. And we collaborated with journals like Feminist Africa, and we produced knowledge out of the spaces. And I think that kind of hybrid knowledge production. And like I said, in this world of social media and what have you, is increasingly important. And again, it can be part of your praxis to do that. And like I said, it also ensures your relevance in the broader world.
Great. Thank you. Well, Sean will wrap us up for the webinar, but a very big thank you once again to the panelists and for all of the fantastic questions that the attendees had sent in. We are very grateful for your time. So over to you, Sean, to close us out.
Thank you. I have the very sad job of wrapping up today's conversation. So a huge thank you to everybody who is joining us today. Keep in mind we have a lot of upcoming webinars, so if you enjoyed today's conversation, feel free to join us for another one. Huge thank you to Jessica Offenberger for moderating today, and of course, a huge thank you to our panel discussion. Thank you to Dr. Sakai, Dr. Temple, and Jessica Horn. We really appreciate your insights today. Thank you very much to all, and hope to see you again in the future. Take care.